Hello, everybody. Welcome to Office Hours, the first session for the new year. I hope you all had a Merry Christmas and a very happy New Year. It was a very quiet in the Self-Wirtz household here in Tyler. We had friends over for Christmas dinner. The kids were all with their families on the East Coast, West Coast, and in Houston. So it was a very quiet day. Winters returning to North Texas. And we are in Tyler, which is about an hour and 20 minutes east of Dallas, just south of Interstate 20. I am the founder and chief content officer for johngself.com and our Guiding Your Career Academy. We have every Wednesday afternoon for our members, we have something called Office Hours, which is a course or a program on some career management issue. It is still free. We were going to have that on members only beginning January 1st, but there was an issue about how to segment those off, and so we decided to continue through the 15th, I believe it is. The producer has not didn't slip me the note as I asked, so that's our plan anyway. So it'll be free for a week or so more. So we hope you'll join us. If you like the content, then what we want to encourage you to do is join our membership career community. It's $49 a month. You get access to all of our live streams. You get access to all of our 10 or 11 courses and online on demand and our library that we're putting together. So thank you for joining us again. Happy New Year. And let's get to it. Today, we're talking about your value story, how to tell it and how to spread it. And that's really critical. And let's turn down the monitors so we don't have any distraction. Now, really important today is that you have to understand the conflict and stress of job search. There is an increased number of graduate business and healthcare degrees, graduate students completing training each year. Now, in certain industries, the old recession-proof healthcare and others, retail and others, realignment in healthcare and some of those other industries have resulted in fewer management and executive jobs. We have more grads and we have fewer jobs. So you need to do the math to understand that it is a stressful time for people in the job market. It can be extremely intense in terms of competition. Executive hiring fell 20.5% from late 21 to 1922. Now, it has fallen again, but not in great number. The interesting thing is the great resignation for the managers and the hourly workers that allowed for all the turnover during the pandemic, that has pretty much dried up for those people. But for the executives, there are a lot of executives making changes right now. Some of them they want to make, and some of them were asked to leave. But those that is up by 50% over 1922. Now this equates to more competition for the existing jobs. And if you look at our chart, more executives, shrinking job market, you get to a pretty tight pinch point, increased competition for the best jobs. And we are seeing that through all across the board. And the recruiters that we speak to are talking about how they have access to great talent. And there's a lot of competition for people wanting the jobs. So for every executive job, there's about 250 applicants on average for each position. Now, the average applicant must make at least 20 to 80 applications just to get one offer, according to the research that we're looking at. That's about 75 to 80 hours of online applications. Now, if you have a career network helping you bypass the applicant tracking systems, bypassing the online applications process, it can take you 6 to 14 months. So you need to plan accordingly. You need to have cash reserves. Many companies have really cut back on their severance programs. That's the average time for a job search today. If you do not have a network, it can be longer, anywhere from 14 to 16 to 18 months. And people who haven't planned for that, it can be absolutely paralyzing and horrifying, because I've had people say, I'm going to run out of money. One young lady said, I'm afraid of being homeless. My parents aren't around anymore. I'm by myself, and I don't really have anybody that can, that take care of me. So I need to find a job. And so these are real pressures from real real people. Now, we've been talking about storytelling, and anybody who knows me knows that I have been a fan of storytelling for a long time. And people have, we've been talking about this, and what I came to understand is that while those of us in the industry may understand the concept of storytelling, people entering the job market really weren't fully, comfortable with the concept. Here are 3 books I recommend that you read. Everyday Business Storytelling, excellent workbook. It is an excellent, excellent workbook. Story 10X by Michael Margolis, another excellent book. And Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller, one of the real leaders in the industry. Now, I'm going to read this because I put this up because people sometimes ask me to send them copies. And if you're a member in a career community, you can email us and get a copy of the slides. But if you can't, let me just read this for you. If you want to disrupt, inspire, and persuade, go beyond the data. You need a story. As a leader, you can't ask your team to invest in a vision or a strategy they don't fully understand or believe in, especially when your ideas challenge the status quo. At a time when disruption is redefining every quadrant of life, including job search, those who can get their story straight can win even the most reluctant audience. And it's really important to understand what a good story is and how to put it together and how to tell it. Storytelling, quite frankly, is how you advance your career. You're not going to move forward just by doing a good job. You're going to have to be able to communicate your value in a memorable way. People do not remember facts and figures. They remember stories. As I said, today, storytelling in the interview setting is more important than ever before. Now, we're going to talk about how to use a story and what it means. And we're not talking about, well, once upon a time or, and then some long involved story. It's really short, focused, and to the point. And so it is an art. It is also more important than ever before. You cannot just say, I don't really have to do that. I've never had trouble finding a job. Well, the critical rule for presentation and job interviews today is that you have to capture interest. You have to engage, but you can't overwhelm them. If you give them too much data, they're going to turn off. You got to build interest, and then like a really clever trout fisherman, you have to reel them in. You want to avoid data dumps. When I was a business developer, sometimes I would put together these real long reports thinking that more was more. And as my wife likes to say, John, more is less. So you want to avoid big spreadsheets and a lot of data. You want to avoid when you're making presentations to your team, you don't want slides with a lot of graphs and charts. How many of you have been to a big meeting and you're sitting in the back of this presentation room and somebody puts a graph up there and says, well, I know you can't read it, but I really thought it was important to show you this. For what purpose? We can't read it and we won't see your slides afterwards. And that's more about the presenter's ego than it is about anything else. Put your ego away. This is all about building interest and reeling them in. You want to avoid the data dump. Prompt. Here's something that you want to, that you really, you want to get this out of your interviewer. When they say, that's interesting, tell me more. When you hear that, you know that you're doing a good job communicating your value. Now, as I said, more is not better. Data is not an idea, but with insight and interpretation, it can supercharge your story. This was a point really made in the Everyday Business Story workbook that I mentioned a few minutes ago. And it's priced right. You can get it on Amazon. It's in stock. And I really strongly recommend that you get that book. Data is not an idea. So don't throw lots of data up on the screen, or don't throw a lot of data. Don't use big, data dumps in your interview. It may be impressive, but they're not going to remember any of it, and they're going to probably write you off. So what you really want to do is develop insights. Now, insights are discoveries that are based on analysis. That's where you're going to get your insight, is from the data. So you want to filter the data. You may use bits of data points to illustrate your point, but you don't have to use charts and graphs to try to impress people. If it's not easily something you can easily read and easily see, don't do it. Form a narrative, and insights will help you shift to a new and better story. So you need data to develop the insights. You discover that by reviewing the data and really analyzing it. And then the insights you get from that data will help you shift your story and your narrative to a better level. So the truth is, data is not the star on the show. It is at best the supporting actor. So I really encourage you to use data as a supporting tool, not with some big spreadsheet, not with a lot of graphs and charts and data points and that people can't read or can't easily see. Don't try to present too much information in the process. I think that people that find that very disruptive. Okay, so when you're looking at data, you really want to elevate the use of it. So data is best used when you wrap it in a story. You'll have a much better chance of making your audience feel something if you do that. So think of it, a cold day, and you have a coat on, and that coat feels so good, and you really embrace that coat. Well, your story is that warm coat on a cold day. So these things these things don't happen, but when you're sitting in front of the interviewer. I think that is a great thing that people do. They wait till they get to the interviewer, and then they try to think up of some story to tell or some example to use. Don't do that. This requires a lot of preparation. We're going to talk about that. So what makes this so important? Here is an extraordinarily important point. People today say, we've gone through 4 or 5 interviews. We find that people aren't necessarily telling us the truth, or people are making decisions and they don't seem to be making the decision based on, who's best or who's best suited for the job. Well, Antonio Damasio, it came up with, he was studying a patient and came up with this conclusion that at the precise point that a decision is made, we are mainly driven by emotion. We are mainly driven by emotion, and that is where the story comes in. Now, what you did, as we talked earlier in our earlier this week in a short video I made, the what is not important. The how and why are what really is the interesting elements. So the what is, don't get caught up with the what. Billy Graham, a noted Baptist evangelist, he didn't win over hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people to Christianity because he knew theology or his biblical training. No, it is how he communicated that knowledge to the people who came to his crusades. And if you listen to Billy Graham's crusades, toward the end of his sermon, when he was getting ready to do what the Protestants in the South call an altar call, asking people to come down and dedicate their life to Christ, he would always get a little bit slower. He would always choose his words a little bit more carefully, and he would slow the pace. And he would generate a level of emotion. And in the background, the choir would start singing Just As I Am very low. And people got up from all over the arenas and came down. It was emotion. I'm not saying that their commitment wasn't sincere, but what got them out of their chair and made them decide was not Billy Graham's incredible knowledge of the Bible. It was his use of loving terms to trigger emotion. And when you are in an interview, you have to use emotion. Now, clearly, there are various kinds of techniques to do that. And what Billy Graham used may not necessarily be the effective way for you to go. But you can tell stories that will trigger emotions. You can make commitments that will trigger emotions. You can reassure a board that you have the passion, you have the knowledge and the experience, and that you promise them you will get that job done. Well, that is, and depending on how you deliver that information, it's a story. If you just say, I'm good at this job, and I promise you I'll get it done. That's just a statement. That's just going in and answering questions. You have to be able to put forth a narrative that's going to trigger a hiring decision. And it's going to be done at the interview table. It's not going to happen on, at your resume. You have to go to great effort to get your resume past the computer if you're applying online. And you're spending hours and hours of time to do that. But that's not going to get you the job. You work your tail off to get that far, but that will not get you the job. The screening interview will not get you the job. It's just moving you to the next page. The first video interview before you go on site is not going to get you the job. It just moves you forward. When you're sitting down from the hiring authority, when you're sitting across from the interview team that's going to be reporting to the hiring authority and giving them feedback, that's where the decision is made. And you must tell a story that is compelling and that you trigger those emotional responses. So the big idea today is that a well-constructed story with the essential elements of the story formula, which is the setting, the characters, the conflict, and the resolution, that is well delivered can and usually will trigger an emotional response in the decision makers. It may not be enough of an emotional response to get them to hire you, but that's better than no response at all, and that happens more often than not. So it's really something that you want to really think about. We're going to talk in just a minute about where do you get these stories? How do you put them together? Now, people say, I still don't understand. What's a story? I'm going to read something to you, and I want you to listen carefully, and then I'm going to read a second version, and you tell me which is more memorable. The global pet insurance market size was valued at $5.7 billion in 2019. The global market will reach $10.2 billion in 2025. Dog insurance is the largest segment, holding an 80.8% revenue share. Dog accident policies show the steadiest growth is 6.5% over the next 5 years. Accident and illness insurance coverage dominated the overall industry and accounted for revenue of $5.4 billion in 2018. Policies usually cover 80% of the total veterinary bill. Okay, a lot of data. It's good data. It's presented well. I did not write that. That came from the book, the business story workbook that I mentioned to you. Now listen to this. Meet 30-year-old Madison. Like so many pet moms and dads, she's crazy about her laboratory Larry. But when checkups, vaccines, and several altercations at the dog park, Larry has become one expensive little pup. So Madison looked into pet insurance and discovered, much to her surprise, that she was not alone. Pet owners spent $5 billion on pet insurance worldwide and are projected to spend $10 billion by 2025. Now, most insurance is purchased for frisky pups like Larry for when they get sick or have an accident. But for owners like Madison, who can get 80% of Larry's stitches covered, they are finding it a huge relief, a giant wag to that. I bet you, some people may laugh at that, but I bet you'll remember the second version. Now, clearly, we don't want to talk about tail wagging dog, in a job interview necessarily, but you can see how you change the information, change the narrative, put it into a story format, and it's much more memorable. Okay, so that I went through that and had several people test that, and they all said the second version was more endearing, it was more engaging, it was something they would be inclined to remember. So where do you get material for your story? Well, you build your story answer from your success, reducing turnover, boosting customer satisfaction, building teams, improving revenue cycle, elevating physician satisfaction, leveling up your communication skills. That's going to become more and more important as people, as our industries evolve and as technology becomes more sophisticated. Now let's talk for a minute about improving revenue cycle. Most people, when you say, tell me an accomplishment, well, I reduced the days of net AR from 60 to 22. End of story. Okay, great. Didn't even tell me how much extra cash that generated for the hospital. However, when you start talking about how you built a team and how the teams in the past were very under appreciated, and how they were never told rewarded for their success, and how we came in and really built a strong team and offered incentives. And every Friday when we met our goal for the week of collections, we would have a pizza party. And, people say, okay, big deal. But you put it in a story. That's something you might remember, and you talk about, and by the way, we boosted our days of cash on hand with $4 million in revenue by improving our days of net AR. Elevating physician satisfaction is such an important issue today. Physicians are really frustrated. If you listen to my interview with Matt Mazurek on Tuesday, and it will repeat tomorrow night, Matt talked about how physicians are really frustrated because although they made a deal with the devil to sell their practices, they now feel like they are nothing more than labor in a machine, in an assembly line. And he's not everyone agrees with Matt, but he's a big outspoken advocate for improving physician satisfaction. And we talked at length about how unions were becoming an issue on the East Coast. So you can talk about a story, something you've done to improve satisfaction, how you can level up your communication skills. This is so important. You can't lead if you can't communicate. And so if you talk about what you did to improve your communication skills, both using PowerPoint decks or how you delivered your speech, your speech construction, all of those things, communicating your communication skills to the board and how you've made dramatic improvements and using a story that dramatically shows, how that happened will interest people. It's always interested people. I've interviewed more than 9,000 people in my 27 years of executive search. And I got to tell you, a lot of these interviews were really painful because people were just answering questions and I kept listening to missed opportunities. And there would be dozens of missed opportunities in every interview I did. There was just a small percentage of people that really aced the job interview. Most people think they're really good at it. Most people really aren't. But you can be. You can be if you learn how to use your experience, use your successes to create little story narratives that will be meaningful and memorable for the board members or for the hiring manager. Now, this is an important takeaway. Storytelling has an established formula, full stop. Full stop. In Hollywood, Don Miller, who was a screenwriter before he became a very successful consultant and helping people with their communication, either on the web or PowerPoint decks or overall corporate communication. He said if people came in and didn't present an idea in the established, it did not embrace the established 4 points of the formula, we didn't even talk to them. We know, regardless of the story, Star Wars, Gone with the Wind, anything that you can remember, anything Steven Spielberg has done, Finding Private Ryan. All of these have a setting, they have characters, there's a conflict, and there's a resolution. And you have to include those elements in your story. Now, sometimes the character and the settings are the same, but the conflict is really important. You don't get to the resolution until the end, because if you don't connect people with the issue, setting and characters, they're not going to really care. They might catch on with conflict, but you need to keep it mostly in that order. There are times when you can vary, but generally that's the order you keep the story in. And these are always the elements you want to use. Now, finding your stories, they're in your value brand statement. Your strengths, your 4 or 5 signature strengths, there's probably 2 or 3 stories for each one of your strengths. Use your core and categorical worksheet as you look at jobs and think about what stories you can use to illustrate a certain point, illustrate a certain strength. Prepare. rehearse, and revise. This is not a one and done process. When you get ready to do an interview, you sit down and you're going to probably end up spending hours doing this, where you say, okay, these are my important signature strengths given what's in the job summary. So I'm going to have these 4 stories ready to tell or ready to use as an illustration if they have a physician satisfaction issue, if their revenue cycle is all messed up, if they've got a lot of turnover. Use those stories to address that. Don't just say, I did it, I was successful. That doesn't have, that's just your what, why and how. It's all important. And you have to prepare. You cannot show up and wing this. You have to prepare. You have to write your story out to be sure it's in good. And then you think about it and learn it, revise it, practice it to be sure that you're putting the right emphasis, using the right words, pacing so that you can trigger those motions at the end. Now, I would say that this is, something that I really want to encourage you. Storytelling offers you a chance to talk with your audience, not at your audience. Okay? Laura Hollowell is an actress, and we all are guilty at one time or another, me more than most, of talking at people, not with people. Storytelling by far is the most underrated skill in business. Guy Vaynerchuk, who's a digital advertising executive in New Jersey and who's a global thought leader in the digital communications. And he is exactly spot on. Storytelling is so underrated, so underused, and so powerful. Do you know what is the most often missing ingredient in a sales message? It's the sales message that doesn't have an interesting story. When I was the senior vice president of business development for Affiliated Hospitals, part of Herman Hospital back in the 80s, we were working with small communities. They were very, very provincial. They were very territorial. They were very siloed, and they had a lot of dysfunction, a lot of financial problems, a lot of community disinterest. They just were really struggling. And so we would go in and spend 2 or 3 days kind of understanding their operations, and then I would write a story. I would write a report, and I would talk about, here are the facts, here are the characters. Other hospitals are facing these challenges, and this is what's happening. And these people are closing, and they're losing doctors, and they're losing employees. And you create what could happen. And then you talk about, okay, well, we can fix this. We have a big idea for you, and we will guarantee our performance. And here's the resolution. Here's how we're going to sell you. Here's how we're going to solve your problem. And it worked 90% of the time. And this is in areas where we were, not only did I have to convince the community, which was sometimes really, really reluctant to have somebody from out of town come take over their hospital, but I also usually had competitors in there trying to pitch their own deal. And I won these deals because my reports were in the form of a story. They followed the storyboard, elements of a good story. And then I followed it up, and in my communication, I always reinforced those storyboard components with those board members. And I always had an emotional finish. That I promise you, if you could trust us with your hospital, we will make it better than it's ever been. There was some message that was based on the facts, and we always tailored it to the hospital, but we always made that sincere offer to each board member individually. When we were trying to sell, the reason we won so many deals is we used the storyboard approach, but number 2 is I spent so much time with the board members, connecting with them, sharing my story, sharing how we were going to solve their problems, and giving that emotional altar call. And it worked. And it will work in job interviews. Now, it's not something you have to be careful in how you do it, because it's not something most people have done. But if you learn how to do this, you can. And if you're a new member, you have 6 free coaching hours, and I'm happy to work with you on putting together stories. And if you are somebody that is not a member of our organization yet, our community, you can join by this Friday and get access to that service. So we hope you'll consider it. I hope this has been helpful information to you today, and that we've taken this kind of narrative a step further to help bring some clarity for you. We will not have a career live in the morning. We're still coming off the Christmas and New Year's holiday, but we will. Our normal coaching and normal activities are resuming, and we will be picking up a lunch and learn next week. There will be, in the following week, there will be another self-perspective. If you missed the interview with Matt Mazurek, I encourage you to check it out on our YouTube channel, Guiding Your Career, John G. Self, and listen to Matt's assessment of maybe where we've gone wrong and what we need to kind of be thinking about for the future. Matt is an assistant professor of anesthesiology at Yale Medical School. So, thank you very much for joining us today. If you have any questions, I put them in the chat, and I'll wait a few minutes to see if that happens. Let's bring you up to date on anything else that's happening. Let's see, the free coaching offer for new members extends through this Friday. The lunch and learn resumes again next week. The self perspective is the week following. The second self perspective is the week following, and we'll have an announcement on that interview. And self promotion. Friday on Ron Thomas's CEO Strategy Focus on his website, on LinkedIn, and on YouTube. Strategy Focus Group. They'll be replaying an interview he did with me from Dubai earlier this year. So if you have an interest, it's on at 8 a.m. Friday morning on Strategy Focused Group, their website on LinkedIn and YouTube. So pick that up. All righty. Well, no questions today. That's great. And look forward to seeing you all again next time. Thanks so much for watching. And if you would like a copy of the slides, let me know, and I'll be happy to send them to you. Cheers, everybody.